What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Restart Pod. It's been a good while since we've had Damon on here. Oh, and now Shashi's in the cut too. Very nice. We literally just started the intro. Damon and I were just talking about pre-recording while waiting for you, Shashi, about how some of the stuff he's up to. Again, can't talk about it fully. Part of the reason he was like interested in raising capital and like scaling up was because he was intending on hiring developers. But he's now at the stage where that's no longer true, and it's changing his like negotiation and his points of like care, I think, in like how capital and his relationship as a founder is to it. Damon, I mean, whatever you want to elaborate on how far you want to go, you kind of set the tone.
Yeah, that's a decent summary. I mean, I think the kind of Cliff Notes version is back in, call it end of November and beginning of December, when we were planning for the 2026 calendar year. We were having to make estimations in a world that was basically pre Claude Code and OpenAI Codex. And the reality on the ground is that we think we can build most of the software for probably a third, maybe a fourth of the costs that we were originally, thinking about having to build. And that's just because the iteration speed with things like Claude Code has shrunken time horizons in a way that has kind of made more things possible in less time and allowed more people, primarily me, to cover more ground. And so it feels like I'm doing the work of multiple people sitting kind of wearing multiple hats in a way that makes what we're trying to endeavor to do far more capital efficient, at least in theory. Now we'll see if that actually kind of works out in practice. But yeah, I mean, basically where I would have had to spend, call it market rate 120 to 250K for a highly talented developer, I'm basically getting, a lesser proxy, no doubt, but still a proxy of that for $200 per month with my Claude Max plan.
Do you perceive any of the like, what's it, the Javon's paradox, on how you actually pronounce that word, but where like increased sort of like capability with engineering is increasing the demand for engineering? Or are you like completely out of it, that like if you were to raise capital, most of that cash would not go towards a developer initially?
No, I mean, I think in the very specific endeavor that we're doing, I actually think I would reallocate capital less to developers and more to thought experimentalists. I would say maybe that's PhD folks like myself. Maybe it's not, right? Things that the agents could try. Basically, I need creativity. I need ingenuity. I need ability to set up experiments that the agents can then go run and be able to kind of reasonably deduce the results that come back from that. So I think it's probably more a little bit of a scientific mind that I would be seeking, and not somebody that could be kind of a 10x engineer that is just outputting code. I think,
Right.
to be very clear about this though, an engineer that could do both would be the kind of the holy grail, right? I think you kind of still need both, right? These things aren't
Right.
perfect. These things do break down, but in the use case that we're using them on, which is why I'm kind of so drawn to the use case at the moment, the feedback loops are basically instant, right? Or at least, on the order of minutes to hours. And so because of that, you can actually know the agents are working very fast.
Right.
Meaning, like, if the results are the results, there kind of is an hourly or daily scoreboard, and if it's working or not. And so
Right.
when it's time to iterate or not. And so basically it just becomes think up a bunch of experiments you can run as many of them as possible in parallel, prompt the agents themselves to come up with their own experiments, try those as well, double down on the ones that seem like they have promise, eliminate the ones that don't.
Yeah, I mean, what seems to be kind of happening, even just like talking to folks, like I think initial stages, like more and more people are just like generally solo founding, like they're not interested in having an engineer to begin with. But like that sentence you just said about like an engineer who is also a blank seems to be common protocol at this point. Whether it's like an engineer who can also be chief of staff, an engineer who can also be a designer, an engineer who can also be a researcher. Like it just seems much more common that the sort of like cross domain thing is a expectation of being hired as a engineer. Like I don't know, Claude, the like a designer who worked on, I think Claude Cowork posted a podcast recently where she was talking about how the way that they look at folks generally are people who are like 80% good at everything, or like 200% at one very, very particular thing, and that's about it. Like those are the only people that they'll hire.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think the way that I would describe it, at least how we're seeing it kind of in the various projects that I've got going is everybody is kind of converging to the reality that is everything done on a computer can be done via code, right? Whether that's Claude Cowork or whether that is kind of Claude Code, which we know Claude Cowork is kind of a wrapper on Claude Code. So even folks that I help that would consider themselves non-coders at all here at like, kind of the different organizations that I'm involved with are interacting with code directly now as like through the agent, meaning like they're using Claude Cowork to do something, usually create multiple versions of material for review, of which they're kind of like picking their favorite one. And they're kind of having to make changes to the content that Claude Cowork produces. And usually that would mean going into the kind of raw code itself and making those changes. And now, because agents are so capable and all that code is kind of self-contained, it's there in front, they want to make pretty subtle changes, text boxes here, increase the font size, that kind of stuff. They can just prompt the agent. It can do it in basically as fast as they would do it. And so the need for drag and drop editors is kind of gone, basically.
Right. With the startups that you field because of venture capital, like your role there, does the amount that the startups are asking for, has it been decreasing?
That's a great question. Yes and no. We are seeing extreme polarization, meaning the companies that have things have all the leverage in the market. So they're getting more money, larger rounds of funding, preferable terms to the founders, or companies without leverage, meaning no real traction, no real kind of unique value proposition, if you want to call it that. They're getting basically nothing. So we're getting this kind of extreme, dumbbell effect where all the best founders, all the best companies are getting more than they would be getting otherwise, because people are kind of betting that they actually have a chance to win out in this world. Whereas anybody with kind of no traction, no, I would say significant proof points, that kind of thing, is getting, I think they're having a hard time.
But I guess like then down the question being like, you get some sense of like where the money is supposed to be going for the raise, like why they're trying to spend as much as they are. Like, is engineering going down or up?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a great sense of how the resources are being allocated once the companies receive them. Meaning, like, is it being divvied up between go to market and sales, or is it engineering talent, or is it some combination thereof? It certainly would depend company to company, but I don't know that I have a great answer for bulk trends to that specific question.
I see. If we want to, I think it's interesting to talk about Cursor and what's happening to them generally. For folks who haven't seen, or I guess like observed the general trend or have been a part of it, Cursor is facing what feels like in the vernacular like a great churn, basically, where Claude Code is kind of finally eating their lunch. A lot of people are disappearing from the IDE, and they posted a article on Forbes discussing how they're in like wartime converging on, we got to run cloud agents in the background, like compete with Codex and Claude Code specifically. I don't see why their strategy is differentiated at all. I'm curious if y'all have thoughts as like, is Cursor going to survive? Like, what's their play here that makes them work?
Shashi, if you want to go ahead.
I'd argue that Cursor survives and does well for the next roughly 3 years because of the technology diffusion rate. The use of Cursor, we were on this maybe a year ago, maybe more. I used Cursor for a while before switching to Claude Code because it just felt closer to the nerve. And I think a lot of developers switched to Claude Code from Cursor. But there are a lot of people who are just getting introduced to this world of agentic coding. And there are a lot of engineers, frankly, that are using Cursor now for the first time and finding it easier than manually clicking the keys themselves to type code. So I think it's worth keeping in mind we're just very early in the curve of diffusion of this technology, and a lot of people are just getting to Cursor now. That's not to say that Cursor has a moat. I don't think they do have a moat. I think Claude Code is a better product. Codex is a better product, and I don't know how a company like Cursor can defend itself when the big labs are playing in the same exact sandbox.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a moat. I think the only thing that keeps them going is that it's slow adoption when you get to the general population.
I guess I would split my thoughts into two buckets. One is cursor specific, and then one is I guess broader. The cursor specific one is I don't know if they survive or not. Meaning, like I think anything that is purely a software layer at this kind of intersection becomes highly questionable about whether or not they're going to have some sort of durability in a world that is becoming increasingly agentic, and the kind of user interfaces that we're all interacting with is changing. But what I will say to their benefit is it sounds like, based on the things that we've been able to read, their founders are aware of this, and Cursor has a history of acting very fast. Cursor wasn't Cursor when it started, right? They pivoted into that space. They kind of let the market kind of draw them in. And so what that tells me is the founders, so long as Shashi is reasonably correct, and if the runway we're talking about is years, 3, 1, 2, whatever, and not months, they have enough time to figure it out. Their ARR continues to increase. Again, if assuming that we're just taking the public reports as accurate, their ARR continues to increase, which buys them time to figure it out. But I do think if Cursor survives in 6 years, that company looks very, very different than it looks right now. Now, to the broader point, the churn question, I think we are going to start seeing play out in real time. And Lakshya, back to the questions you were asking around how are we thinking about this, internally on the VC side. Acquisition of customers is incredibly fast in kind of a world or an age of AI, meaning like the good companies have customers almost immediately, right? They have a product, they find a need, they deliver value almost immediately. So they pop to kind of, hundreds of thousands sometimes in revenue almost in a day, in a week, in a month. The question that we've all been asking is, what of that revenue is durable? What sticks around, right? What is people just simply sampling everything they can get their hands on, testing it for a month, 3 months, 6 months, depreciating the ones they don't really want, and then kind of continuing on with the best of them, which right now kind of tends to be Claude Code or OpenAI Codex. And so I think what Cursor is living through is the most public and probably the most far out in front of the world that almost all of these AI companies are going to be living through in the very near future, which is, I have revenue. How stable is it really? And how much do my customers actually love me?
I think like Cursor has the benefit of, sorry, I moved away from the mic. I don't know what that did. With Cursor had the benefit of, like, maybe a year ago, their go-to-market cycle secured them a lot of really gigantic contracts. Like, basically major F500 enterprises have a Cursor contract. Not all of them have like a Claude enterprise contract. I think watching what is going on with Cowork specifically, and like this is the general point again, Damon, about like most problems are wrappable in code, like for the purposes of enterprise efficiency. And so like the one advantage Cursor has is that they have what feels like a go-to-market lead. Like there are people who haven't heard of Cursor yet. There are people who haven't heard of Claude Code yet, but their companies will have Cursor licenses and not Anthropic ones. And that gives them at least like some time to quote unquote blitz, I think. And it sounds like they're hiring a lot more go-to-market to like keep that advantage, to give them time to figure out like what evolution looks like. It's just really hard for me to imagine like what they blitz to. Like I can't, like in reasonable conscience, like in talking to anyone, recommend that they should spend more time on Cursor today, because I assume that like whether it's Cursor raising, I don't know what the last round they raised is, I assume a couple like tens of billions, relative to OpenAI, Anthropic raising hundreds of billions, and all looking at the exact same revenue pool. Like in my head, I say learn Claude Code to people, because that sounds to me like it's going to be the thing that lasts for like 5-10 years, as opposed to whatever Cursor is or could be in said capital race.
Yeah, roughly 3 months ago, Cursor was worth 29 billion and change, somewhere between 29 and 30, on the back of roughly 2.3 to $3 billion round. That was November-ish of 25.
Yeah, and the
Interesting.
Cursor founders could still end this journey with a really great outcome, and the VCs that funded them could
Yeah.
end with a really great outcome, right? So the
Right.
financial story hasn't really been written yet. I also think there's like a really interesting underlying story, which is the Windsurf acquisition
Mm.
by OpenAI, which hasn't really materialized into anything at this point. Like there was a point in time where Cursor Windsurf was like the primary entry point for all of this agentic coding before Claude Code came
Right.
out. This was like the arena to win, and it felt like the most tangible part of the agentic engineering
Right.
space to own. And in that moment, it's really interesting to see the decision that Anthropic versus OpenAI made in that moment, where
Mm.
an OpenAI made the decision first to have a strategic conversation with Cursor, didn't materialize, and then acquired Windsurf. Um, the same thing played out again with OpenClaw. It's really interesting to see how the OpenAI leadership team went one way and the Anthropic leadership team went the other, where the
Mm.
Anthropic team decided we're just going to build right on top a layer right on top of where we are, and we're going to make it really good and just continually iterate and make that better and better. The OpenAI team decided to spend billions on each of those acquisitions, and I'm pretty skeptical that either of them will materialize to anything.
Well, and just like watching like Peter Steinberg's tweets, so the open claw guy for folks who aren't listening, aren't aware, the like I Windsurf as a product still gets updates. I assume it's kind of slowly being sunset, probably. Like it's Windsurf, if you go to their site, doesn't feel like an OpenAI product. It feels like it's just its own thing that still exists. Um,
It does, for the
Whereas,
record.
yeah, like OpenClaw, like a lot of Peter Steinberg's tweets makes it sound like he's on the Codex team now as like a product leader, effectively. Um, and I don't think like my impression is that OpenClaw is not going to be like OpenAI's future. Like they're kind of like they're supporting its open source future, I suppose, insofar as keeping Peter Steinberg on. What they want out of him is his like product mind and his vision of agents that then manifests in Codex, possibly OpenAI Frontier as a product. Um, and so I think like that's the sort of thing that like OpenAI is like, I think OpenAI has effectively like emerged as like they have corporate problems, right? They probably have internal politics and leadership wanting to look good and all this other typical stuff that slow them down kind of because they have a lot of branches to like what their company is. Um, and I just kind of assume that like the resolution of the Windsurf thing, of the OpenClaw thing, where Codex ends up going, how well Frontier does, is a thing that we will see with a much more trailing edge than we currently have. Like it's just kind of bound to be slower because they have a lot of things that are working at like 50-60%, whereas Anthropic has two things that are working at like 90% for people. So it's easier to kind of be laser focused and point the whole org at like, holy shit, Claude Code is having a gigantic moment. Thank you, Boris, for making that tweet over December. Now we can point the whole org at this one problem and go to market and we're good, you know? Like they have the privilege of focus by being second place effectively. Insofar as like what their enterprise contracts actually do.
I think just some housekeeping. I don't think OpenAI actually bought Windsurf. They were going to, and then that was mostly one of these acquisitions, quote unquote, that ends up being a acqui-hire of the founding talent where the team is left behind.
Yeah, and a lot of that, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the actual company itself was acquired by Cognition, who are the makers of Devon, not OpenAI. So that product is still on. It's not it's not under the OpenAI umbrella. It's not. Those two are different things.
Oh, interesting.
So,
they did reach an agreement, but then the deal fell apart. Okay.
Yeah.
But the founders end up going to OpenAI, right?
I think some of them are there, and I think one of them hopped to Google. Yeah. Again,
okay. And then the team got adopted, like the actual entity got acquisition with Cognition, I see.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of these deals where, the size of these deals, and they've tried to, some would say, avoid regulatory scrutiny. So rather than going through the standard M&A path, you kind of do an acqui-hire of the founding team, basically, without actually purchasing the business, and you give people large signing bonuses and great salaries, and that's kind of what you end up with. So, but yeah, that was the it's just kind of, again, just tying a bow on kind of how that actually transitioned.
Right. Yeah, no, I like I think with the general like coding agent space, like I talk to like CIOs and CTOs and they're talking about like, oh, look, all these things we could do, blah blah blah. I'm like, just like, dude, like just let Anthropic do their thing. Go talk to whichever like salesperson you need to. Just like wrap it up, bro. Like we don't need to make it this complicated. Where it's just like I think even like I posted that video like earlier this week about just like how folks should be thinking about being like AI native, whatever. Um, and I've been pleasantly surprised at how much is getting passed around, and people are like, "Oh, this co-work thing is actually really useful," and people are just like bringing it individually into their org, um, and just like using it independent of what their org is actually allowing them to do. Um, where the go-to-market cycle of Claude is just like they have the privilege of one downloadable app. It has a code, a chat, a co-work tab, and it's really easy to not get confused about like code and co-work are kind of related. Chat should graduate you to co-work eventually. Whereas like OpenAI has like way too many surfaces for you to understand like what is like the place I should be deriving value from. Google is even worse insofar as like their documentation, their product space is generally really hellish. So it's really hard to like point someone at like you are getting a Google product and you ask which one, but there's like 17 possible things to reference in being useful.
Can I go to a tangent here, which
Hit it.
is I'm really curious what you think of the legal AI space, Harvey,
Mm.
Spellbook, and I believe that Anthropic launched a legal product
Yeah.
earlier this month, a legal plugin.
Yeah, plugins
And
into co-work that are legal focused, financial focused, a lot of stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. Do you see this the same way? Do you think that this is one of those things where once the big lab gets in the space, there's just no room left for a Harvey or a Spellbook?
It's hard for me to conclude confidently. I think Harvey, I mean, when we were interacting with legal, especially like we picked up the opinion from a lot of lawyers that Harvey's not that good of a product. It was a brand decision, like you say that you have a Harvey contract, and because Harvey's a legal AI product, it makes the CIO, the leadership of the like org, look really good because they got this big contract done. It's like a branding thing for a legal firm to adopt. And like I assume that extends to like saying you have an Anthropic contract or you have an OpenAI contract because those brand names are obviously gigantic. But I don't know if there's like a sort of like premium put on the brand of like, oh, like I have a relationship with like the cafe that's down the street, or I have a relationship with Starbucks, that sort of thing, like which one feels better for the sake of like a legal firm acquiring clientele? I don't know. Like there's some level of it that's like, I don't think a client knows what Harvey is. They probably know what Anthropic is. But there might be some benefit to saying like, we are so legally surgically focused that we use Harvey, I can't say either way confidently. I just know that like it's harder being a builder, I think, and wanting to do like vertical slices when you see the enterprise chase also kind of going down, give a plugin, and you're up against their go to market to some capacity.
Yeah, the Harvey story is interesting because we've seen several of their would-be competitors at the various stages. I mean, I think there's 3 AI for legal in this winter's Y Combinator batch, all with kind of unique angles. Actually, I think one of them was founded by some of the previous early employees of Case Text, which was an early acquisition made in the AI legal space. I believe, to my knowledge, that product has actually been sunset now inside of that acquiring firm. Harvey has always had the benefit of great founder market fit. Basically, they were legal teams. They knew how to settle lawyers. Lawyers are, generally speaking, laggards for tech adoption. And so what they really executed well on was speaking the language of lawyers and helping them onboard to a probably in some places candidly inferior product than just the things they could have got from the big labs. But it was that hand-holding process that they were purchasing. Harvey's long-term bet, as I understand it, is that because of their go-to-market advantage, because of the direct data they can pull from their customers, they are going to try to flywheel that into perpetual advantage inside of the legal domain. They've also spent large sums of money millions reportedly to acquire what would be proprietary data. The proprietary data play, in my opinion, is still playing out in real time, similar to how Lakshya was kind of both siding the Harvey argument. I think I would both sides the data moat argument. I think intuitively it sounds logical to most people when they think about it, but in practice we haven't actually seen data moats matter all that much when it comes to competing with the large research labs. So I think we will see how this plays out. I mean, there are some in the healthcare space that have a similar trajectory, similar kind of uphill battle now to Harvey, namely like a bridge, open evidence, those kinds of things is what I'm thinking about. And it becomes a game at that level of valuation of, can you maintain momentum? Can you continue to sign up customers? Can your customers continue to stay with you? And can you continue to elbow out effectively the research labs that will probably have a better product, or at least an equivalent product in the reasonably near future, but that lawyers simply may just not turn to because Harvey's already available to them?
Yeah, I mean, there is a sort of thing. I mean, like the abridged open evidence case is really like worth bringing up, because I do think that, like, for whatever reason, I treat open evidence as having more immunity to Harvey, not even because of the domain, but because I know that the way that they grew so much was just product love. Like, their word of mouth was so incredibly strong that, like, I think that educating a user to onboard with open evidence is a lot easier than educating a healthcare worker to onboard to Claude Code, because there's specific stuff you need to set up, right? And if you're already at the stage that you have a lot of user love and people, like, your product has a really high NPS score, open evidence to me feels more immune to like the snowplow of co-work. Because if you think about it, like, you go to like a medical conference and like your peers are all just talking about like, yeah, I use AI, I use open evidence, right? That single suggestion is much more likely to convert than like some salesperson has rushed your like director of technology or something like that, and now your director of technology needs to figure out how to train your teams on blah blah blah, because cowork's not a product sliced for healthcare workers specifically, right? And that gives open evidence a sort of like, the word of mouth is already really good, and the onboarding is already clean for a doctor to adopt as an individual. So the consumer purchase pattern kind of bubbles up into an org. And that's favorable right now to what the slice of open evidence is, because they have product love and really high NPS.
There's also a level of incentive misalignment, I would say, in law that doesn't exist in kind of the health sciences. And I'll elaborate slightly. In open evidence, it's perfectly fine, and it's in the normal pattern for physicians, providers, researchers to be reasonably transparent with everything that they're doing, right? They're sharing to an AI. The AI is disseminating information back to them. Legal firms is kind of the opposite. They purposely shroud things in obscurity. They want their processes to be their processes, right? The only kind of value prop they have over their competing law firm is whatever unique value proposition they can kind of carve out. And I think in that way, using a legal AI or another similar AI that every other law firm or their other comparable law firms is using just simply doesn't confer an advantage they can pass down to their clients that they're billing per hours. Whereas open evidence directly saves providers hours in the day looking through it, right? And so it's inherently beneficial to the user, open evidence is, whereas Harvey isn't, because the way lawyers bill is by hour. So them saving time is somewhat counterproductive to their overall practice.
Yeah, I am. Even just like the orbit of this conversation generally, like I'm thinking a lot about the Cal AI acquisition by MyFitnessPal. Like, obviously very, very different. Like, we're talking about like B2C versus B2B. But like this kid, like, basically running like a super vanilla product that like anyone could run, like, I guess get the same functionality out of just using the vanilla ChatGPT app. But getting acquired for like many, many, many millions by MyFitnessPal, even though there are already like brand options for dietary trackers, and they all added like a scan feature. Like the go-to-market cycle, I think Cal AI was bootstrapped. I don't think they raised. Cal AI Crunchbase.
I'm not immediately recalling a raise.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was just like a solo, like not a solo kid, but like a small team that just like spent their own revenue to spend it really intensely on influencer marketing. But that gave them enough of a like chase over like, I use Macro Factor, there's LifeSum, there's MyFitnessPal. They all added a calorie AI tool. And despite, as you and I have talked about, Damon, like calorie like vision models don't like actually work ever. Despite having a product that doesn't fundamentally do the job it needs to do, its go-to-market was so good that they grew, and that gave them a end game that was a big happy exit. Does that translate to like enterprise and like a venture backed startup? Harder to say. Like I think you have to be more worried about like end game thoughts, but it is just like it's curious to me to look at right now, like the go to market being like the only really survival advantage now and nothing else. Like it's all about like how much can your go to market beat the chase of your competitors, and how much revenue turf can you acquire that's available.
Well, and frankly, in a world in which you even believe in part that software is commoditized, it's the only thing left. So if you're MyFitnessPal, it's the only thing left. Like if they can't get go to market right in a world that's increasingly evolving, and apparently this kid got it right. Basically, if they can't replicate that, they're dead. When we can debate, but like they're not going to make it, right? Because to your point, the technology by itself doesn't stand alone, and so it's all about kind of that go to market motion and how do you get to as many people as possible. So it's probably as much a talent hire as anything else. Hey, just tell us how you did it, come and do it for us, and then we'll be good to go.
Right. Lucky you, Damon, that you don't have to think about this with your interested domain, because you don't have users.
To be frank, I think that's part of the reason why I'm drawn to this idea right now is because the trying to predict the go-to-market motion that's actually going to work is almost futile, in my opinion. Like it really just takes trying as many things as possible, hoping that you kind of flash in the pan open claw, right? Historically, that guy, made tens of, maybe even hundreds of various repos / projects / products until one just finally had virality. And that's just frankly not my I don't think it's nor is it my unique aptitude, right? Like I don't think I have great sense of like what's going to go viral on TikTok as an example. And so what I'm biasing for instead in thinking about it is how do I shrink the feedback loop in another domain where if I win on that vector, it's also winning. I don't have to compete in the go-to-market, at which I'm not kind of uniquely suited to win at. So I do think it is kind of a, just thinking about in a world in which software is commoditized in part or in whole, I don't want to be doing a purely software play where I have to rely on somebody else electing to use it or not. Like if my software works, great. That's a win. I need it. That's it. If I were doing something else in which I was relying on selling to somebody, other users, I would not do software only. I'd be firmly in the hardware plus software space.
Yeah. Same old, man. We have some version of this conversation every single week about what the hell do you even do anymore?
I can tell you. I mean, because we're going through this, right? Like YC Demo Day is coming up in about 2.5, 3 weeks now, and a good number of those companies are software only AI, basically for something. AI for legal, AI for healthcare, AI for whatever. And so we have rigorous debate around how do we assess these things at all. How do we pick winners from losers? How do we speculate as to which company is going to make it, especially when these companies are like 3 months old, right? How do you take a bet on something like that? And so we talk about it pretty often. And what I can tell you is in the select conversations I've been able to have with other folks whose full-time job is trying to pick winners and losers in the venture space, they're similarly just like, we don't know. We're gonna throw a lasso around these 12 companies and hope one of them hits, basically.
Right. No, what we need to do, if we ever, I mean, obviously you're going down your direction, but if we ever make a product again, we need to get all three of us dancing on TikTok. I think that's the only hope. I think that's the only way out.
Oh, I don't think that's going to work out so well then. If that's what we're down to, I don't think it's going to work.
Never know, man. That's what I'm saying. We got to try things, bro. We don't know what's going to work. We got to try things. We got to A/B test Damon versus Shashi versus me dancing on TikTok.
The audience will be laughing at us, not with us.
Hey, those are views, Cluely. It's the Cluely model.
Do we want to hit on that?
The guy lied about his revenue, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm recognizing we're short on time, but we can talk about it. I mean, just like briefly, like what we can wrap on it, because I think on the topic of go to market, I guess being the theme of this thing, however we ended up there, Cluely seems to be flailing in the open seas, unfortunately. I'll start because I was very much like a Cluely proponent back in the day. I think this is just a curse of like they were very, very viral, and like they're having a failure that anyone else could have. It's just more embarrassing because they were loud and this kid's a gigantic upstart. You know, like he's very much like a twerp that would piss people off, and them failing publicly is getting people more excited and riled and like, oh, I said so kind of thing. Like again, like startups fail all the time. Like they're making a meeting note taker. You know, like how differentiated is that? We talked about it. Like how much does virality really convert on people wanting a meeting note taker? Not sure. If anything, I would think that they probably have more revenue in front of them if they try to like almost be an agency for their playbook on virality, because more people want to solve that problem than take meeting notes. You know, like I don't think they're like. I think their team has a lot of interesting skills. It's just not manifested in a product that's differentiated or useful for people. Like if there was a Cluely agency that like just like consulted for startups around SF, is that a venture backable company? I don't know, but I assume it's a very, very profitable company because they understand social media a lot better than 90% of people who make tech. That's just true.
You probably sell candy
maybe
bars.
To put a bow on this whole conversation about, we've talked about legal AI wrappers. We've talked about other AI wrappers like Cursor for different applications. Clearly being another version of this AI wrapper using AI for something. I think there's a ton of room for custom AI built software. This is the upskilling into the AI world that we've talked about, where if you're a professional and you upskill yourself into AI coding or skills or application or using cowork really well, you can create a lot of value for your organization, which is more of an N of one product than N of many product. And in the investing space, you're trying to find companies that will create N of many implementations. Like you take one software package and use it over and over again across lots of companies. The opportunity seems to be much stronger for the N of one, the upskilled employee, and a lot weaker for the kind of category of software that you create once and deploy 1,000 times.
My only real thoughts on Cluey are you have to have attention to get a chance. And they are, you know, if not singular, they are in the top quartile or 10% of folks who can get attention. That attention cuts both ways. Right now it is cutting in a negative way. I don't know that this is personally a company that I would use or that I would, you know, advocate for their sustaining success. But the fact of the matter is the fact they demand and can shape so much attention gives them a chance. And so to your point, like AI note taker, there's a world of them. Like some of them do it well, some of them do it bad. You have to eventually build a product that people love. Otherwise that attention eventually directs somewhere else, right? You kind of catch the next hottest thing, but you also have to have attention or you don't have a chance. So they've kind of got, you know, one half of the kind of two half metaphor here. And so, the overall lying around revenue, like I think based on the estimates, he said he had roughly 7 and they actually had like 6.3. So I don't know. You know, you can always kind of parse revenue too. Is it actually ARR? How much of it's sustainable? Is it one-time contracts? I mean, I do think you're probably debating some semantics there, but you know, as far as with the future of the company, that they've got a shot. They've got money. They have attention. They have more shots on goal that they can, you know, begin taking advantage of. Again, far be it for me to try to guess who's going to win in a software only world right now.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say is like I think so clearly like they have like a big like influencer cycle almost. And I think like a lot of their company decisions were oriented around like what makes this go viral, where there was even a period where like they're paying software engineers like 400,000, which is a lot for a starting founding engineer. And they did that because they wanted it to get a lot of attention and like get eyes on their company, right? They've since peeled that back. Like now it's still like the typical like 125 to 150K for like a starting engineer at a startup. Like they have a lot of decisions like that like I assume are generally pernicious to actually running an effective org that are probably like trailing them a little bit. I know like in the past, like not year, but maybe in the last like 6 months, they've had just like a lot of churn because again, their most talented people are their marketing people. I'm sure they have opportunity everywhere to go do other things. Like I think Roy Lee's future, hypothetically, like in the N of 1 case versus the N of 1,000 case, I assume even if this thing crashes and burns, this entity crashes and burns, he has a very successful future in front of him if he were ever just so inclined to just like start up like a shop, like an agency for like marketing that goes around SF startups trying to get their launches and their like apps off the ground. Is he the sort of person to like procure that sort of like relationship and be that sort of like, you know, like very like consulty type? I don't think so, but that's like an option available to him given the way he's played his hand, you know, which for the record is a better position than like the vast majority of founders here that like have a product, they spend like 90 hours a week working on it, no user ever puts eyes on it, it never raises a dollar. They're getting pestered by their VCs who are also kind of confused, and it's just like a circle of nothing. That them failing is just a very public event for what is a very generally incendiary person. So again, I don't blame them for it. Like you do what you can with the hands you have, but it is
consequence of
interesting. Yeah.
The consequence of building in public is that it fails sometimes, which means failing in public. And yeah, I mean, startups are a game of acquiring resources, right? How do you acquire talent? How do you acquire investors? How do you acquire revenue? How do you acquire some unfair advantage? They hit on a couple of the vectors, but the reality is you need all of them. And this game's really hard. And people that win out of the gates don't sometimes win in the long term. So we'll see. I think they're going to have other options, but yeah, even the fact that we're talking about it here is proof positive that they're doing something right, even if not everything right.
Yeah, I'm sure there's like 70 out of the other meeting note takers that haven't been like whispered in conversation before, you know, and like their failing is just less loud, you know, like that's just a matter of fact. I guess I think that's a good place to wrap. Interesting conversation. God knows what's happening in the SaaS world. But again, I've been messaging like, dude, I gotta do robots. And then I'm like, wait a second, I don't know shit about robots. We gotta figure it out. Anyway, we'll catch y'all later. Thanks for joining. We'll see y'all soon enough. Peace.